Good. I'd like to call to order the school committee meeting for February 25th, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence. Thank you. A listing of matters on the agenda are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed, in fact, may be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being videotaped for cable. Could we get an approval for our minutes from the February 11th, 2019 meeting?
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Budget time. Dr. Oakley.
It's that time of the year again. So tonight, so you know that we gave you a draft budget at the last meeting, and that just so you can become familiar with, the initial draft. And again, this is the initial draft that Mickey and I went through and worked on. So we're going to go through that tonight. I'm sure you'll have ideas. I know you have some questions. I've actually had some people ask me, and I know you'll have more questions tonight because I didn't get a chance to talk with all of you. But I'd like to start, before we go line by line, presenting just some, I think, important things that you should be aware of. It's kind of a continuance of the last meeting when I talked about the state commission on the foundation budget and how they're trying to look at the Chapter 70 formula different. And they're looking at it differently. They're looking at how can we incorporate a formula to help us with SPED costs and English language costs and healthcare and those types of things. So that's still in the works. It's still in the legislature. I think it was a good thing that Senator Timilty was at that meeting because he heard us loud and clear that we need to do something about this, and it's not just us, it's happening everywhere. Every school system is short because of those things. And I hope that people actually will watch this on TV and reach out to Senator Timilty and Representative Dubois and say, please, please work on this, because although West Bridgewater may not get as much money as some of the urban districts through this reform, we will get a significant increase that will help us. So on that note, I wanted to play something for you to give you an idea of some of the issues that everybody's having, and we are too. And so I want to show you this video. Hopefully, oops, you'll get.
Welcome to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where we pride ourselves on having one of the best public education systems in the country. This is a place where we hold the truth to be self-evident, that all children, regardless of ethnicity or religion, income or zip code, are endowed by this Commonwealth with a certain unalienable right to an equitable foundational education. But what if I told you this foundation of equity has become meaningless? What if I told you that while all communities here in the Commonwealth are held to the same high academic performance standards, not all communities are able to provide equal tools to achieve these goals? This inequity is oftentimes based on zip code alone. What if I introduced you to two educators, two sisters, both teaching children in public schools, but in different zip codes, and because of these zip codes, work in vastly different realities? Let me tell you a tale of two sisters. Laura Phillips is an art teacher at Marshall Simons Middle School in Burlington.
Right, so he's having a round at that shirt.
I've been super lucky. Everything I need is provided by my school system. The district basically provides everything from pencils to notebooks to art materials. It affects my teaching because I'm not worried about the kids not having anything. I'm not worried about the kids that can't afford it. The kids that can afford it, they might bring in extra things, but everyone is equal.
Laura's boss is Dr. Eric Conti, Superintendent of the Burlington Public Schools. Burlington has a $60 million budget, 3,500 students, and spends $17,200 per year per student.
Teaching is a very complex job, and I think you get better over time. There's a cost to turnover, and I've been happy that we've been able to maintain our staffing levels and keep people in the job, get them trained up, so we can provide the highest performing professionals to work with our children across the community. We have a very active business community that's very supportive of the schools. Our Chamber of Commerce couldn't be more supportive. We have an education foundation that provides fundraisers every year and provides opportunity for innovation.
But this is a story of two teachers, not one. Remember, not all teachers are as fortunate as Laura. One such teacher is Laura's sister, Karen Kavanaugh.
One of the mottos that we've had in Brockton the last couple of years is that we do more with less. And every year we're asked to do more with less. For classroom supplies every year, I buy my class all my own notebooks with my own money because I know some of my students can't afford them. And I'm not reimbursed. My kids are at a disadvantage because we don't have all those resources. Because of budget cuts, I changed grades so many times. So forming a collegial base in a strong cooperative learning environment, the person that you worked with last year might not be the person you work with next year. So from my standpoint as a teacher, I am not looking for more than what anybody else gets. I'm looking for the same. So if I'm held to the same standards, I should have the same materials, supplies, support.
Karen's boss is Dr. Kathleen Smith, Superintendent of the Brockton Public Schools. Brockton has a $260 million budget and nearly 18,000 students. Brockton spends just $14,000 per year per student.
80 teachers were laid off because of budget cuts. Little by little, we have watched a reduction in Chapter 70 funding throughout the state. Funding that was supposed to provide an adequate education for every child, no matter the zip code, has now been reduced when we're spending, and this is not just Brockton, additional funding for special education mandates, which our children need. Additional funding for health insurance that we have to provide to all our employees. Inflation rates that are out of control. Spending for professional development with the mandates that our teachers face and making sure that we are leading the nation, we are number one, we provide a rigorous curriculum. All of that, while funds in Brockton over the past 5 years, we have been cutting. For some districts, they are able to go above and beyond once they meet foundation. If they want to bring one-to-one devices throughout the district, they're able to put an extra $1 million, an extra $2 million, etc. into their budget to be able to support those initiatives with the new high-stakes testing coming in. When you're talking about your urban districts and your gateway cities, we do not have that opportunity. What we now have is a district trying to keep their head above water.
The disparities between these two school systems are not an anomaly. The lack of equitable support for students stems from an outdated educational funding formula that was adopted in 1993. Laura and Karen recently sat down to discuss the differences in their schools.
Kids are making decisions in middle school now, do I go to a tech school or do I go to the public school or private school? And it's important that the school provide everybody with equal opportunities.
And we don't even have materials to do great things.
Right. So it's unfair. It's like every student should have the same. They should all be able to have the specials that make a well-rounded, student.
Same experiences. If it's a public school and it's the same state, we all should have the same. It's not fair to the kids in my school. We have great kids here, and they're not given all the opportunities that would present themselves for them to make a good choice of what to do for a career, to prepare for a job, just to be prepared even for college.
Yeah. Every day coming to school knowing that this is a great place to be and that...
you're not worrying your job is going to be eliminated at the end of the year.
Right. For the first time, I have a new colleague, and it's because someone retired.
And I've had complete new teams for the last 4 years.
Yeah, that's horrible. Yeah.
Think about that for a moment. You wouldn't use Windows 3.1 on an Apple IIe computer today. Yet Massachusetts continues to fund public education on a formula created in 1993. And let's not forget today's health insurance costs, costs that exceed the 1993 formula's projections by 140%. And while some communities, like Burlington, have been fortunate enough to supplement their budgets with local funding, many, like Brockton, have not. This has created significant inequity in both the education and opportunity for all students. It is something that Dr. Conti and the entire membership of the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents strongly believes needs to be fixed now.
Massachusetts is in the place that it's in nationally because of the work that was done 25 years ago, and that brought together lawmakers, educators, the business community to make significant changes in the school funding formula, standards, assessment, and governance. Public schools were really reshaped, and we're reaping the benefits of that. We have to have another effort like that for the next 25 years. Reshaping the funding formula for schools is the foundation of that work. If anything, what we've learned over the last 25 years is investing in children in the Commonwealth pays off every time. Please, let's make sure that we provide all students across the Commonwealth, all communities across the Commonwealth, a realistic foundation for them to provide a high-quality education that continues to keep Massachusetts families and children and our economy performing at the level that it's been performing.
So I thought that was an interesting video, and I think it shows that there are inequities throughout the Commonwealth, and also that we need to all stand up and fund everyone equitably, because even if we're not going to get as much money in Chapter 70 as maybe a Brockton will get, it's good for all of us if all kids have a good education in the Commonwealth. But what really stood out to me in that video, even more than the inequities between Burlington and Brockton, you can see that Burlington, what they said was they had a $17,200 per pupil expenditure. And per pupil expenditure is just, you take all of your in-district expenses and all your out-of-district expenses, and part of those out-of-district expenses, besides special education, that's out-of-district placements and agricultural school, but also health insurance, both for active and retired employees. They take all those expenses, put it together, divide it by the number of kids you have, and that's your per pupil expenditure. And you can see the discrepancy between Burlington and Brockton, but really what stuck out to me was West Bridgewater's per pupil expenditure is actually lower than Brockton's. Our per pupil expenditure is $12,744, and this isn't just because of Chapter 70. We don't get a lot of Chapter 70, but the town of West Bridgewater would have to make up the difference to bring us up to a higher per pupil expenditure. So when I watched that for the first time, I understand that Brockton has a lot of tough issues and probably more significant needs in some students than we do. But still, the fact that we are at $12,744 per pupil, and they're touting that $14,000 is low. Our per pupil expenditure in West Bridgewater is 16% lower than similar districts and 18th from the lowest in the state. We are number 299 out of 317 in what we spend per pupil. So I don't know how much longer we can go on a shoestring. I put this graph together. I took towns that were similar in size, under 2,100 kids, household income about the same in a 20-mile radius, and you can see that the per pupil expenditure, we're in maroon, and then the state average is green, and you can see that Abington, Carver, Holbrook, Avon, Hull were significantly lower. And yes, we do not get a lot of Chapter 70 money. Only about 25% comes through Chapter 70 for us. The rest is through the town, grants, school choice, revolving accounts. But Avon gets actually a little less than us in Chapter 70 money. They have a lower percentage, and they still have a higher per pupil expenditure because the town of Avon has decided they need to invest in education, and they put more money into that. So that's why their per pupil expenditure is higher. David Gagney, our town administrator, uses sometimes the Route 24 corridor when he compares like tax rates and stuff. So I took the same graph that he had, but I did it for per pupil expenditure, and you can see that these districts may not be similar, but they're in our same area. And again, West Bridgewater is the lowest, and the state is, we're well below the average in per pupil expenditure. Again, I don't know how, I know that every year we present a budget and people say, you can't keep going up, you spend too much money on education, but the fact of the matter is, we're not spending a lot of money on education. We're 18th from the bottom, so we're not. This town is getting a big bang for their buck, but you can only go so long and continue to do this without eventually having to make cuts and things like that without putting the money in. So I just thought it was, once I saw that video, I'm like, people are really, touting that we got to change the whole formula based on a $14,000 per pupil expenditure, and we're lower than that. I think you need to know that. With Chapter 70, you know that we have to provide a free, appropriate education to all students from kindergarten through grade 12, and it's partially funded. As I said before, Chapter 70 funds approximately 25% of our school budget. The other 75 is funded through town appropriation, receipts, school choice funds, grants, and revolving accounts. And, if any of those grants or revolving accounts or school choice funds go away, we'd be in trouble because we put them into our general budget. So the governor came out this year, the West Bridgewater's Chapter 70 funds, a little over $4 million. It's actually an increase of $345,612 over what they proposed in FY19. Now we know that it will change from the governor's budget because then the House budget comes out, then the House Ways and Means budget comes out, and they change it, and the Senate budget, and so on. But it's usually a pretty good idea, and usually the House and Senate don't go down from what the governor gives in Chapter 70. Now that could change, but usually they don't. So if the governor's budget was to pass, there would be an increase from last year of $345,000, which is significant because last year and the year before, we only had an increase of $30,000 in Chapter 70 each of those years, so $60,000 over 2 years. This year there's $345,000, so that doesn't come directly to the schools. It goes into the town pot and then, gets divvied up, added to all the receipts in the town. But that should help the town's financial situation too, because to have an increase after last year we only had $30,000, that actually was really good news that we got from the governor. So we have to keep our fingers crossed. We have to see if the House and Senate will go up, and if they do, we need to make sure that we get out and call our senator and call our House person and say, you need to keep this budget, you need to keep Chapter 70 up there. So the two potential areas that are being addressed in the Foundation Budget Review Commission is special education and English language learners. There's health insurance and that stuff too, but I want to highlight special education and English language learners, and the reason for that is because you're going to see when we go through this budget, those are the increases that we're seeing, and those are the things that we can't control. We cannot cut special education, it's mandated. We cannot cut English language learners, it's mandated the services they get. And those are the things that are going up. It's not just our district, it's across the state. That's why they're trying to address that. They haven't yet, but this significantly is impacting West Bridgewater, so I wanted to go through it a little bit with you and bring it home to the West Bridgewater numbers, so that as we're looking at this budget and you see why we have an increase that's higher than normal, you'll see why. Or at least you'll understand it a little bit better. So you know that we have to provide, in the least restrictive environment, a free and appropriate education to special ed students from age 3 to 22. IEPs dictate the appropriate placements and services for each student. And the appropriate placement isn't always the local public school because of the increase in severe needs that some students may have. But the most unpredictable, unfunded costs for special education are outside placements for students whose needs cannot be met within the district. And I'm talking about severe needs. We have kids that are medically fragile. We have kids that maybe will never step foot in a public school. And as I talked about last time, a lot of this is because of the wonderful things that the medical field has done with having longer life for kids, keeping kids alive that maybe 30 years ago wouldn't have made it, but medical science has made it so they can, which is wonderful. The thing is, education has to catch up. Some of these kids are still medically fragile, still might have severe disabilities, and the regular education system, the regular public school may not be able to educate them. So they have to go other places. Well, the local school system is responsible for those other places. They're responsible for those costs. And in addition, the transportation to these placements is also going to be covered by the sending district. And what I mean by unpredictable is, for example, this year, at the end of August, our budget was already voted in, budgeted, voted in June. And in August, we had a family move into an apartment in West Bridgewater. The student, one of the students, was already in an out-of-district placement. Well, they automatically stay in that out-of-district placement, but now they're living in West Bridgewater, so West Bridgewater has to pick up that tuition payment and that transportation payment to a tune of between $70,000 and $90,000 a year. That I did not budget for because I couldn't have known that that was going to happen. We also have students who are out of districts and being transported, and sometimes things happen. An example of a student that was having a problem on the bus or van or taxi, whatever we were using for transportation to get them to this placement, and the transportation company said, we need someone like an aide or a one-to-one or somebody on that bus, a monitor on that bus to watch the student because I'm afraid they might get violent. I'm afraid they might hurt themselves or something. Well, where does the cost come from? We all of a sudden have that cost. I didn't budget for that cost. We had another one that was in an out-of-district placement and just was going through a phase, maybe a little meltdown thing. They need a one-to-one for more need. Where does that cost come from? We have to do it. They're our student. Even though they're being educated out of our district, they're our student because they live in West Bridgewater, and we're in charge of them educationally. I didn't budget for those things. So how do you get through the year with that? It's tight. I've already had conversations with the town administrator that we need to have some type of special education stabilization fund that other towns are putting in. East Bridgewater put one in last year. That maybe every year you put some money aside to the special education stabilization fund. So if you have unpredictable things, you then have money to pay for this, because how can you pay for it if you didn't budget for it? We have a stabilization fund in town. It's not a special education stabilization fund, but we do have a stabilization fund. And as we get closer to the end of the year, if we can't make ends meet because of these unanticipated special ed costs, we may need to go to the town to cover that, because how would we know that this would happen? But these are the things that are really busting budgets, and it's not just us. Rehoboth had to go for an override over the summer last year, and it was because of unanticipated costs. Burlington had to go and get money out of a stabilization fund because of unanticipated costs. Marblehead, I just read the other day, is dealing with something because they were trying to pay the special ed costs from one year out of another year, and you can't do that. But it was because of unanticipated special education costs. Only 1.5% of our population is placed in an out-of-district placement, but this represents $1.7 million or 12% of our proposed FY20 budget. Circuit breaker funding, you've heard of it before. It's available from the state to supplement the local budget for tuition costs, usually about $43,000 to $45,000. But over the last several years, the reimbursement has not been fully funded by the state. So you do get some back, but it's not fully funded. And the more importantly, transportation to these places is not reimbursable under circuit breaker at all. And sometimes the transportation cost can be as equal or even more, depending if you need a monitor or a one-to-one-aider on the transportation, than the placement itself. And we don't get reimbursement for that at all. So you can see in this chart, I had to take a screenshot, I think you can see. These are our FY20 anticipated out-of-district placements based on what we have this year. And in the first column, it's the number of students at that particular placement. I don't have the names next to the placements because of confidentiality, but there's very small lettering down there. The next is the tuition per pupil tuition. All right. And then the transportation cost. It says NA. Then in most cases, the person doesn't need the transportation, or it's residential, so they don't have the transportation. But then what that total cost, so you see that down here, there's one placement that we have that 5 students go to. 5 students at $50,000 a piece, plus the total transportation cost for all 5 kids is $62,000. So you can see that that's, $313,000 for those 5 kids. There's one very severe student. This placement, it's a residential, 365, 24/7. $335,000 placement for a severely disabled child. So the total, $1.7 million for 1.2% of our population. And I'm not saying that these kids don't need this, they do. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't get these services because they need these services. What I'm saying is it's expensive. It's everywhere. It's everywhere in the state that it's expensive. Every town is grappling with this, and this is why the state needs to look into, are there other ways to be able to fund these costs other than just the local town school budget? So again, we need to speak up. We need to find other ways to help fund this. Because right now, it's us. And again, they can move. We could have someone move in tomorrow. We own them. We pick up the payments. And you can't anticipate that. I think it's important to note as we go through this budget that our costs in this budget are $321,000 more than FY19 for out-of-district claimant. Okay? That's 2.4% of our increase. Special ed overall, you can see in the blue, it's our in-house services. So the kids that we service here. Then the red is the out-of-district, and then orange is the transportation. The real increase over the year you can start seeing is the out-of-district and the transportation because we are getting more severe children. I'm happy to say that 18, 19, 20, we're actually 19 and 20 staying pretty close to 18. Our in-district isn't going up as much, and I can tell you the reason for that is because Mr. Michael Azek has been working on trying to build capacity within the district and bring services like occupational therapy and behavioral therapy, bringing them in-house instead of putting them out to agencies where they charge, a ridiculous amount of money per hour, but we hire a person ourselves. We get more out of them, and they don't cost as much because it's not, you're not paying a middleman to get them. They're our employees. So we are trying to build capacity within the district. It's really the things that are out of our control, which are these kids that truly need these out of district, and we have no control over what the tuition costs of these places. We have no control if their tuition goes up. So, and we have no control over the transportation. If we have one kid that has to go someplace and we can't find another district that has a kid going to the same place, we pay the whole thing. There's one student we're paying $299 a day to go to a placement. It's the only transportation we could find. We called everywhere, and it's the only transportation we could find. But by law, we have to get the kid there. English language learners. By statute, all students not fluent in English receive ESL services by licensed teachers. The amount of service per student ranges from 90 to 135 minutes per day for level 1 and 2, and 45 minutes per day for level 3 and 4 students. So they test into these levels. If you're better, as you get better and more proficient in English, you become, a level 1, then a level 2, a level 3, a level 4. A level 1 would be someone who comes to this country and doesn't speak any English, so they need more service per day. And these kids are spread out over 4 schools. Currently, 11 of our English learners are in levels 1 and 2, and 11 are in levels 3 and 4. And although 22 kids doesn't sound like a lot, when they're at all different levels over 4 schools, you can't have one person service them anymore because school days are at the same time. And they're all different grade levels, so it's hard to keep them together. We also have 19 FELs, which are former English learners, meaning that they get to a point where they test out, but the regulations now are that for 4 years, you have to still monitor them quarterly, and a teacher needs to write a report on them quarterly and do a report on how they're still making progress. They have to be monitored so that they don't fall back, and they don't get into trouble academically, and they have to do that for 4 years. So look at the increase from FY16 to FY19. We are increasing the number of ELLs and FELs in West Bridgewater every year. And you can see just between 16 and 19, the big jump. And I anticipate it's going to keep going up and up. This community's changing. We're getting much more diversity in this community. We live next to an urban center. We just had, right before vacation, the week before vacation, a student move in from South America, doesn't speak any English, into the high school. So it's like, all right, well, that's 90 to 135 minutes a day. You can't just put them in a class. They have to have that English language instruction every day. Our languages, we're a low incident population, believe it or not. They call you low incidence if you don't have at least 100 ELL kids. But our language, we have Haitian Creole, which is the highest, Arabic, the next, Portuguese, Spanish, Mandarin, and Urdu. So we have a number of different languages. Some of the kids, more and more of the kids coming, speaking no English at all, and living with family members that live in West Bridgewater. So we have to service them, and that is an increase in this year's budget. Several years ago, we hired a part-time teacher, and we didn't have that many for I would say 5 or 6 years. This part-time teacher could handle the kids. We probably had a handful, maybe 5 or 6. And then they would move out, move in, and stayed about the same. We increased it to a 1.0 this year. And it's just impossible for a 1.0 to get it around to all the schools, especially, Heath, you had, because you lost some, 7 or 8 kids move in just over last summer into the Rose McDonald School. So I did put in for an extra 0.5 to make it a 1.5 to be able to service all these kids across the schools. The other additional cost you'll see in English language line is that parents by law, if they want an interpreter for parent conferences, for open houses, to talk with guidance counselors, to come in and talk to a teacher, the district has to provide an interpreter in that language, and it ranges, the company we go through, it ranges between $250 and $300 per hour with a 3-hour limit. 3-hour minimum. So these kind of hidden costs, but they're in our ELL line because we don't know who's going to request an interpreter for these things, but they have the right, and if they do it, we have to hire someone. So those are really two of the things that have increased, and I wanted to give a background on that so you could understand why. Because I think a lot of people would look at it and say, 327, how'd something go up that much? What's that? And I thought that giving you an explanation would help you get your head around it a little bit better. So if we look at now the FY20, the directive from the selectmen, the email we got was level service from FY19. So level service meaning keeping the same services that you had last year. The only change for us really for level service would be I really do need to add that 0.5 ELL, but I'll show you that I cut in another place to keep that, so it's kind of a wash to make that. But so level service, basically all contractual increases go up and all that stuff. And last year the FY19 town appropriation was $12,573,064. Level service would be $13,259,402. That's an increase of about $686,388, or a 5.46% increase. I'm listening to the collective gasp in the room. And I know that's a lot. But that is level service. So we felt that it was appropriate to come with level service and let you at least see what our budget is to give level services to the kids of West Bridgewater. We also have $2,277,248 in school choice grants and revolving accounts, which brings our total budget proposed $15,536,650 for FY20. And again, that would be a level serviced budget. And I need to tell you that school choice, grants, revolving accounts, that's using every bit of school choice, grants, and revolving account. It's actually not probably the best way to balance your budget, but that's what we need to do because our per pupil expenditure is so low, we need to put in our own money. If we want to give kids the same services that they've been getting now, which are good services. What I want to be clear on is that the special ed out-of-district placements are increasing $321,478. That's 2.4% of the 5.4. Other than those increase in out-of-district placements, the rest of the entire budget, teachers' raises, administrators, heating, maintenance, contractual increases are 3.06. What's putting us up to that 5.4 is that special education out-of-district placement. We can't touch that. So if cuts have to be made to this budget, it cannot be made out of that. The cuts have to come out of the 3.06. It can't come out of ELL, so it has to come out of regular education. But I think it's important for you to see that if we didn't have that increase of special education out-of-district placements, our budget would be up about 3%, which is pretty average. Where does the money go? I don't know. It's kind of small. I might need to increase the font on this road. But you can, this is in your budget book. So you can look at this. But it basically shows you that big pinkish one is 56%, that's instruction, that's teachers, because we're a people business. And so that would be the biggest part. The light blue is the next biggest, and that's special education. That's in district and out of district, including teachers. That's 26%. 26% of our budget for about 11% of our population. But that's the cost to educate these kids. And this pie chart, I would say, is very similar to every school in the Commonwealth. We're all in the same thing. And there's things that we just can't control. I mean, educational supplies is 1% of our budget. And that woman from Brockton, the teacher from Brockton was talking about, well, I guarantee if I put out a Google form today, I could tell every single teacher in the school district. I'd be shocked if every single teacher doesn't buy some type of supplies for their classroom. And I know that the elementary especially do it more. They put out a list for parents to help them with it because we don't have it in our budget because we only have 1%. And then there's, utility costs and student activities, but parents pay for student activities too. So it's in our budget, but they also pay a fee. So, that's kind of just, I wanted to give you a background because I think that helps you get your head around it more. Now we can go through each line and ask if you have any questions as we go through. But what I want you to know is I already made some adjustments. I needed to increase the ELL by 0.5. So the Spring Street School nurse, we're decreasing by 0.25. We, this year, you know how we put in that extra money through grants, we are not getting the health grant this year, which usually helps us partially cover our nurse. We're not getting that, so we're going to decrease the Spring Street nurse by 0.25. It will still cover the students there, they just won't be there an extended period of time, but the students will still get coverage. They'll be there from 9 to 2:30. The guidance secretary is going to become just a 10-month secretary instead of all year. So that we're decreasing that by 0.2, so that's a saving. And then we're cutting $9,000 from virtual high school, which are our virtual courses that we have juniors and seniors take at the high school. And the reason for that is sometimes it's so that they can fit things in their schedule. Sometimes it's because we're a small school, so we want them to have some more variety. But really, one of the main things that Mr. Bodwell and I decided about 5 years ago we really wanted every kid in West Bridgewater to have the opportunity to take a virtual course before they went to college so that they would understand what they're doing when they get there. What that does is it takes about 60 or so sections and cuts it down to maybe 30 sections that we could offer a year. So it's kind of against what we talked about in strategic planning and stuff, but I have to add the 0.5 FTE in ELL, and so that's where I'm getting the money from. Because I know the selectmen will say, well, that's not level service if you add ELL. Well, it is because I'm taking it from somewhere else. And then I did propose an increase in the athletic user fees from $100 flat fee to $200 flat fee. I know that I came to you last year and the year before, and there really wasn't an appetite to raise the athletic user fee. Well, we have a full-time athletic director. We have more kids playing sports. We have increased number, which is awesome, and kids should play sports, but we can't continue to pay for it, and fees are going up through the MIA, and transportation is going up from the bus company, and we need help with it. So I actually put these things in already. I know that we'll discuss that. If you don't want it, then that would change and go out, but I just wanted you to know those are the things that are already in there. Any questions about that? So
So when we lose a grant, that means it's not level service, even though it was something we covered before. I would see that as the town didn't have to pay for it before, but why is it then something we have to make up for? So if we were to lose school choice, we were to lose grants, we have to cut. That isn't something the town is.
Well, no, I mean, if we lost school choice, if our school choice, right now, I think we put in for close to 1.3, right? $1.3 million that we're going to, so I need to get enough kids to have $1.3 million. We're accepting kids right now. That's about 250 kids or so. So we need to make sure we have that money to cover it. But let's just say if 50 kids decided, I'm not going to West Bridgewater next year, going to go back to my old school, and we couldn't replace them. And so we lost that money. Say we lost $100,000, 200, whatever. I would propose to you, we need this. We'd go to the town and say, look, we lost this money. We don't have the money to put in anymore. Can you give us this money? If they can, they can. If they can't, they say, you have to cut.
Right. It just seems a little deceiving, though, if they're saying give us a level service budget. Level service wouldn't mean just because we lost a grant, we ask for less money. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I'm just pointing out their level service.
I just knew that.
Level service from what they paid for last year versus true level service would be keeping something.
And what I was trying to do, too, is, some people could argue, too, that adding a 0.5 ELL is still level service because I have to service all those kids that move in. And then other people would argue and say, no, if your FTE was 1, level service is 1. Mm-hmm. It's hard because when you're dealing with a police department or a fire department, a highway department, it's like, and you have 20 FTEs, it's like, we need to add an extra officer. Well, that's not level service because you add an extra person. But it's because, maybe the town's bigger, or there's more incidents, or there's more things in town that you need another person, or something like that. Schools, it's just like a moving target. I can't anticipate if I'm going to get 20 more ELL kids. So, I still, I could get 10 kids tomorrow. I can give you the perfect example. The town of Worcester had over 300 kids from Puerto Rico when they had the hurricanes. How do you deal with that? And they all, you have to hire teachers on the spot.
Right. We wouldn't even have enough chairs.
And then, so then if they had to propose their budget the next year and say, we need to level service, but we have to add all these teachers. So some people would say, well, that is level service, even if you have to add a teacher, because you have to service these kids. Right. So I took the tack that the 0.5, if I'm going to get, I thought maybe I would get questioned by you or by finance committee or selectmen, and they say, well, you can't add a 0.5. We asked you to level service. Say, yeah, but I decreased a nurse and a guidance secretary in virtual high school, so.
Or no, I appreciate that you looked at those things to see, but I just.
Yeah. So, that's where, but I absolutely understand your point. The last thing I want to say before we go through, unless anyone has any other.
Just a quick question. Just even with your saying that you decreased the Spring Street nurse, but we lost the healthcare grant. Mm-hmm. So that was like a double negative. That was a true loss. Yeah. So we lost the grant, and now we had to take that from.
Yeah, and what you'll notice is that's why our FY19 amount of putting in choice and grants and all that stuff is actually a little bit higher than what we're putting in FY20, and that's because
we lost the grant. Right.
That's the difference.
So that has an effect too.
Yeah.
That again, level service, but we lost a grant.
Right.
So how do you?
And it was a grant we had, and we lost it just because, just like anything, like the federal grants are getting cut,
sure.
And most of the smaller, most of the suburban districts aren't getting that grant
Right.
anymore.
So through no
Really,
fault of
more
ours.
earmarking the urbans for it.
So through no fault of ours, did we
Yeah,
lose
no.
that grant? It was
Right.
just something that was taken from us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
So that's where that effect comes in, is the lower number for choice grants and all that.
yeah,
So again, we're dealing with yet another negative.
right. Which is why, then on the other hand, but then does it go in the back apparent, you know, I propose to increase the user fees from 100 to 200 flat fee. You know, I'm just trying to think outside the box
Right.
to try to find other ways to support the budget, because I know that 5.4% increase is a big increase. Again, I think we need to look at it because of what is making it 5.4 versus 3.
So after we go through the line by line, we're going to come back to your suggestions.
Well, no, these are already
This
done.
is already
They're
done
already
with
in
the
there?
5.4.
I already put them in.
If
Okay.
these weren't there, it would be even higher.
Yes.
That's the point.
Okay, so
because,
I think
like,
we need to highlight
I
that, and
tried to bring
again,
it
for me.
down, and I'm telling you,
Thank
the
you.
reason I put in the 0.5 FD is because we don't have a choice.
right.
We don't.
And so if I don't do these things to get the 0.5, no, I could have just said, well, we need a 0.5, so now it's 5.8% increase.
Right.
I didn't do that. I'm giving it a 0.5. The thing is, if we can't do that, then I'm going to have to, unfortunately, because of the way that the statutes are set up, cut a different person
Right.
that it's not mandated
Right.
to have the ELL instruction, but I'm seeing what those teachers are doing in
Right.
ELL, and they're running around like chickens with their head cut off, because there's 4 buildings, and they're trying to cover these kids, and they're doing the best they can. But, you know, that's one thing. Next year, also, we have our audit for ELL, you know, our coordinated program review for ELL. And so they're going to make us do it anyway, but it's the right thing to do for these kids.
Right. Speaking of for the kids too, so what's the effect with that 9,000 cut on the virtual learning?
So that's, what was it, Mark, like 62, 63 sections? Yeah,
So that was cut in
that we
half.
have this year. So it cuts it probably, because each course costs us $275.
So now those choices have been cut in half.
Or not the choices, but the number of kids.
The number of
That can
kids.
take them.
That can take them
Oh,
per
okay.
year. We're also, you know, going to try to look at other options. Can we do somehow think outside the box and do like a virtual high school thing with our own staff in-house somehow? So we're looking at other things, but
But that will cost money too.
yeah, everything
With
costs
training or whatever, right?
money. Yeah.
And were those maxed? Were they well attended? We used all those spots we had.
It's been, I mean, honestly, I think the best part of the virtual, again, originally you probably started to say, in a small school you might not be able to offer as much, so let's do some electives that kids can get that we don't have here, like AP Psychology, which tons of kids want to take, or Criminology, which tons of kids want to take. But I think, Mark and I started thinking the bigger thing was, kids now are going to go to college and they're going to take these virtual courses, okay? They're not going to be babysat anymore. They're not going to be going to a physical class all the time anymore. And that means that you have to be a person that can plan and be organized and know that you have to study, even though you're not going to see a professor every day or every other day. So we said it would be nice to have every single kid have that experience here when they're in kind of a safety net. So if they start failing it or they start not doing it, it's like, hey, listen, this is what you, so they can learn it in a safe environment when we can help them, instead of just sending them off to college and them going, I never took a virtual course before, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and maybe filling the class or getting overwhelmed or whatever.
Which would probably cost more than $9,000 just for one family,
Yeah.
for that one course.
Yeah. So that's really, you know, and slowly we started with like 10 and went to 20, 30, and we got up to 60, and, you know, so I mean, could that be something that's changed? It's just, as I looked through it, I said, you try to do what the least effect.
Right.
So when you
On
make
the
cuts,
kids.
you make cuts out here, and then you come into.
Sure.
So that's what my reasoning was for those things.
Okay.
But if, you do need to know that every 0.5% is about $66,000 that we'd have to cut.
Say that again? Every half?
Every 0.5%. So our budget right now is at 5.4%. That's what, level service is a 5.46% increase, 5.46. So if you take a 0.5%, that's 4.96. I have to cut 66,297. If you want to go to 4.46% increase, it's 132,594. 3.96, and I just kind of went down. That's an overall cut out of our what we're asking the town to appropriate for us. But you need to remember, these cuts cannot come out of those special education things, and they can't come out of ELL. They can't come out of anything that's really contracted, but it comes down to its FTEs.
Right.
And we're a people business. 80% of our budget is people. So you can say, as we go through this, you can say, well, what if we cut supplies? Well, supplies is 1% of our budget, and it's not going to do much. So if we get to the point, if you, and it's your directive, I'm just showing you the numbers. If you want me to cut, if you want us to go down to whatever, you just have to tell it. And then what will happen is we'll meet with our principals and we'll go through a list of cuts. We'll rank them and get them to equal 66,113. I mean, that's how you have to do it. But I can tell you that it will be positions. I would, like I said, we're a low per pupil expenditure. We're not heavy on things. We have one assistant principal in the entire district. I mean, most people in a middle senior high school our size, from 7 through 12, would have 2 assistant principals and a principal. We don't. We don't have any assistant principals at our elementary school. I don't have an assistant superintendent.
Exactly.
There's not a lot of fluff. God, we don't have, most districts have math specialists, literacy specialists that aren't teachers and they're just at school and they go in to help. We have 1.8 reading specialists in our entire district. Most schools have school psychologists and adjustment counselors. We just have one school psychologist for each. We don't have a lot of fluff. We don't have any fluff. So, and you can tell that we have no fluff because of our per pupil expenditures. That's $12,700. How can you have fluff in that? When you're 18th from the bottom, you obviously don't have fluff. So, but you need to know that I don't want you to go in blindly if you say do this, when we come back and I have to give pink slips and we're doing those things, we'll find ways. We've already actually had to brainstorm things because they need to know, the building principals need to know that we need to start thinking creatively how we're going to do this. So, here's your summary. This proposal is $686,388 above last year. There's the school choice, the grants and revolving accounts, and this school choice is on having 1.3 something million. I think it's 1,365,943 in school choice. That's about 250 something kids. We're getting applications in now. So, and I believe we're graduating about 19. So I have to make up 19 plus, whatever, but it depends on space. We don't always have space in every grade, and I'm not overcrowding classes, grades for it. And then, I think it's important, the special ed out-of-district placement is 2.4% of that increase is that. The remainder of the budget is 3%.
So for that special ed stabilization fund that you talked about, with respect to that, how would that come into play? How could we start something like that?
Yeah, that wouldn't come into play in budgeting.
Not now, but future.
I talked to the head of FinCom and town administrator a couple years ago about it, and at that time they didn't think that it was something that they wanted to pursue, but I think they're starting to get more and more school systems are going to it. So what that would mean is if we had, part of this increase, obviously, is that we had someone move in that we didn't anticipate, so for next year. And what that would do is, with this person that came in this year and a couple of the other things, if we, for example, had $150,000 in special ed stabilization, then we could take that money and we wouldn't have to go back to the town.
So that 2.4 could look like a 1.2.
Well, yeah, because you wouldn't put it in our budget this
right?
year. Yeah.
I'm just in
It
theory.
could. But,
okay.
So, how do you get that money?
How do you get that?
Well, towns do it differently. Some towns, every year, they might, when you have free cash, like our town, they put it into stabilization.
Okay.
So some would say, put it into your regular stabilization, take $50,000, put it into your sped stabilization. Cap it at $200,000 so it can never go above, and maybe you don't have to use it for 4 years in a row. So you don't keep growing it, but it's there for emergencies. It's there for those unanticipated things. Another way that you could do it that we're actually pursuing to look at is if we did start something like that. Right now, we get a little reimbursement from Medicaid for the services that our special providers provide to our kids, speech and language, things like that.
Sure.
That money doesn't come to us, it goes into the town's free cash. So we could actually probably get more money if we did more reporting, and there's a lot to it. We're just looking into it. But if we do that extra work, maybe we could talk to the town and say, instead of it going into free cash, could that money, if we do the work to get it, go into a sped stabilization? It's not money the town would have had anyway. We're doing the work for it. It's reimbursement. Put it into this little stabilization fund so if we get hit 2 years from now with a move-in, we have that. So that's what I've been starting to talk to the town administrator about, and I'm actually going to sit down with him and I believe the head of the finance committee to see if there's an appetite now for starting something like that. And I'm going to show them. Last year we had 2 move-ins that really hurt us, and then this year another one, and it's hard to balance your budget when that happens. I mean, I froze the budget. When did I freeze it? Maybe back in October? I froze the budget, a hard freeze in October. No more professional development. No, I'm saying no to eliminating paper that people need.
Yeah.
Froze it 100% because I'm trying to make up every dime because we had this, and we're going to need help from the town. So I know that I'm going to be going to town for it.
Okay.
So, do you want to, we'll go through the lines so you can see the change?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's start. We can start right on page 3, 3110. This is just school committee. It's pretty straightforward.
So what's the breakdown of our actual costs from fiscal 18? From
Expenses?
Fiscal 18.
Yeah, so in so what I'm looking at is we spent 13,893, and the expenses came through on like the school committee expenses, 8893, but we're only budgeting for 5,300 next year. What did we spend so much on this year that we're not going to need next year? I mean, it's only $3,000.
You know what the addition to that was? That was the policy project.
Oh, see? Just saying. Just saying.
You gotta cut that money back. And that's
So it's, what usually comes out of there is the membership to be part of Mass Association of School Committees, the joint conference, and the increase was,
The 3,500.
Actually doing that, okay.
That's it,
And we won't have that expense next year because we'll be done.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, they don't, we'll be done,
Yeah.
we'll be done paying
Done.
for it because
We'll be
it's
done
only
paying.
a certain amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
Sorry.
Swear to God, I did not put Molly up to asking that.
Well, no, I was just curious why we would be asking
it's
for
true.
less than the previous year.
Yeah, and that's why. Next is superintendent, office. The one difference, and we explained this last year, but FY17, we had an assistant superintendent. We don't now. So that's why that is different. Oh, you know what? I didn't even explain. So last year at the finance committee meeting, a number of people, or some people, I don't remember, said that they were having a hard time reading our budget. And they mentioned it's not the same, and I remember Sarah sitting there going, I don't understand what you're talking about. And I didn't understand what they were talking about. So I called Meredith Anderson. Mickey and I met with her, and she said what they were talking about is the budgets that FinCom gets from David for all the other departments have the FY 17, 18, 19, so it's left to right this way. Ours was FY 20, FY 17, that way.
opposite.
It was opposite. So I don't think it was that. It was just before we get to them, they are probably done with almost every town budget. So they're reading the same thing this way, this way, this way, and I think that's what was confusing some people.
Yeah.
So what we did this year is we flipped it. So, I mean, we have to have more detail just because we get audited, and by law we have to have more detail. So we can't just have, and we put a lot of our own school choice and stuff in, so we have to have that. But what we did do is we flipped it, so FY 17 is first and 20. So I'm hoping that they'll be happy with that.
Yeah, it reads nicely just because that's the way.
Yeah.
You go
And we were
back
just
to-
backwards, and it never, I mean, I was used to it, but I get it. They're going through, they probably go through, 30 budgets before they get to us, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, why is this backwards? So we did flip it. So you can see that now, because it's opposite of what we used to do, you really want to look at the FY20 appropriation request. So FY19 operating is what we're dealing with right now, and our appropriation request is the next one. Then what we're adding and the total school budget. So if you want, so that difference is between the FY19 operating and the FY20 appropriation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So they're just in a different place than we're used to.
Okay.
I will say PCC went up a little bit. It's really not that much, but it went up a little bit because they went up to $1.25 a student instead of $1 a student, and that's that Project Contemporary Competitiveness that we're members of through Stonehill College.
Yeah.
Everything else is contractual. Business. Any questions on this? It's the business clerk. Now that changed because we had two positions, kind of went into one, and we also have a a new business manager. So it was a little bit higher. You can see the financial director in operating FY19 because a veteran business manager of close to 10 years left, and we got a new person in, but also there was a little bit of, I believe, vacation buyback when Sarah left.
Okay.
Legal services is up this year, higher because we are in negotiations, and I'm praying we'll be done by the end of this year because we're not budgeting for legal services for next year. So I'm hoping that we will have a contract. But usually we bump it up during the year when we do negotiations. Questions?
Mm-mm.
Data processing, you can see it's the annual financial audit, the website licenses, our student information system that we have to have for Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Health Master for the Department of Public Health, and any of the other things that we need to have. And the reason that that's actually down from the FY18 actual is because we were installing new software, and so it was installation charge with all the new SIMs and ASP stuff for the state data reporting, and now it's just, you still have to pay licenses, but it's not the installation.
Are the Google Classroom fees included in this?
Google's free.
The classroom piece of it is to you pay yearly.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about Google.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons we went Google.
Yeah.
How is the SIM system? Is it working out?
Mm-hmm.
How is the SIM system? Isn't that what we changed to?
It's getting better and better. It's a lot easier than the old days because a lot of the stuff now is real time, all the data. It's just that, it's a lot easier, but they're asking for a lot more stuff. I mean, honestly, most districts have a full-time data person, and that's all they do is state data reporting, and that's their job. And we have it split amongst 3 different either clerks or secretaries in our district, in addition to what their regular duties are. So there's a lot of stuff that comes with that.
And it's data entry they have to do, or is it reports to the state?
Reports to the state, data entry, all that stuff.
Wasn't the idea that the state could pull the reports themselves if we put the data entry in?
Yeah, but it's not there yet.
There's specialized codes with it. So it's a matter of making sure you're aligned to each student's appropriate code. So using the special education as an example, the students outplaced with special services, they have a number assigned to them. Mm-hmm. So even if we put it in and it changes, it has to be constantly monitored to be updated.
And then we pay a fee to have this that they tell us we have to have?
We pay a fee to have the system. So there's a lot of different software data systems out there. And the one that it's called X2 or Aspen. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you have to pay for it.
So that's not considered an unfunded mandate, though, even though that would almost seems like an unfunded mandate.
Yeah, it is. Actually, on my
does
unfunded
classify?
mandate report last year, we talked about e-forms and
okay.
SIMs, and yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. But believe me, if we don't get that report in on time,
no, I'm not suggesting not to do it. Yeah.
Next line is principals. And you can see that most of that is contractual. There are some changes because of change in personnel from last year to this year. Retirement and other people coming in, and then we switched some responsibilities around. moving someone else to Spring Street versus who was there before. So, again, those changes are pretty normal. So this would not be with the guidance secretary. And the office expenses. Did you have a, well, did you have
What's the line high school expenses? Is that the office expenses?
Yeah, the majority of that in high school is graduation.
Oh, okay.
So getting, all the stuff for graduation, the robes, the diplomas, the mini diplomas, the risers, the mailings. So I would say that the majority of high school expenses is graduation, and then mailing out report cards, mailing out reports, and dealing with all that type of stuff.
So what's the high school accreditation?
High school accreditation, good question, is
Excuse me.
every 10 years we have to have a visit, and next year is our visit. Believe it or not, it's already been 10 years for our accreditation.
Here we
visit.
go
So-
again.
So we're already working on, we got this building because of the last one.
That was cheap.
So we're,
Should be a walk in the park this year, Mark. Mark, you're on the hook.
actually, I always tell them, I'm like, be careful, because now they'll be like, oh, what a beautiful building. Now we can really look at curriculum instructions. Whereas before it was like, instant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now the hard work.
I'll be looking in all the corners.
So what does this entail? It entails
expensive.
not just, but, the materials that we have to put together for the visiting team. The visiting team that comes out, and they come out for a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday to Wednesday, Sunday to Wednesday. We have to put them up in a hotel. We have to pay for their meals, pay their travel.
Can't we just tell them we're doing a good job?
I know, right?
to have this? Well, if you want
really
to
have
be
to sleep
accredited,
over?
if you want to be accredited,
We'll billet them in our homes.
I know, right? Next time I won't recommend these
No.
high expensive
I
restaurants.
mean, the alternative is
No.
we're not an accredited high school, and you don't want to have that. So is it, yeah.
Right. You get what you pay
It's
for.
part of
How's that?
being, if you want to be in the membership.
Okay.
that's
I just
what
didn't
you're gonna do
remember
every 10
seeing
years.
that. I
We
just
don't
didn't.
want to lose our accreditation.
No.
Okay.
So,
All
We
right.
worked way too hard over these 10 years
Yeah.
to get it where it's at.
I've earned it.
so the 5,000 was because the self-study, and then the 10,000 is because it's the actual visit.
Okay.
And they've changed the process, and they had, what did they call the pre-visit? What was that called? It was just a few people came out. The collaborative conference, and so they came out this last year, and that's where that was.
Yeah, but your overall expenses of
Oh, yeah.
operating
They
versus
had it
request are still down 20 grand.
Exactly.
So
So if you look at the bottom line, but those
Okay.
are some of the things that.
Is that percentage actually correct in that line?
say that again?
Is that percentage correct? 11,000%? That's just, it's not that high of a number. The percentages.
Maybe from zero.
It's based on the $85 for the operating,
Wow. For 10,000.
because that's all we've spent so far. 85. We're in the self-study right now.
No, nothing.
Yeah, we're in the self-study right now.
So that's
Okay, teaching services. These are your curriculum coordinators, your teachers, and this is all regular education. The library instructional assistants, substitutes for each building, monitors, and you can see that if you go way over to the right under school contribution FY20, under high school teachers you have 1.25, 1,000.
205, 477.
Okay, that is basically where our school choice committee goes.
Oh.
Obviously, we're putting in 1.3, so it's in other places too, but the majority of our school choice money goes there.
Teacher.
The reason for that is because the first year that we had school choice and we didn't have this much money, but we had a significant amount of money. When the auditors came in the fall, they said that the first year we did it, we didn't know really, so we were putting it in all different places, and the auditor said it's just a lot easier for auditing purposes if you have it in one place, because it's cleaner for them to look at it. So that's where we put it. And so it's funding all those teachers, or at least $1.2 million worth of high school teachers. So that's our largest, I should say, contribution in one spot. The other, anyone else have any questions on that?
Yeah, so this overall went up by 10%. Is this all in, why is that?
Well, step and track raises and contractual benefits. You can see that there's an increase in contractual benefits because contractual benefits this year contains potential raises. But and in order to negotiate in good faith, I have to have something in there. But I can't put the teacher raises or the COLAs with the teachers yet because I haven't negotiated next year's contract or in negotiations. But I have to have it somewhere. So this is really the 150E line where you would put benefits. There's also in there retirement payouts, sick leave buyback. You remember last year, that 218, we had 9 retirements. We only have 3 this year. So, the sick leave buyback and the and those types of things. There's also incentives for any contractual benefits. So, like the 4th year stipend, stuff like that. Perfect attendance. That's it. So anything that's in the contract, it's put in contractual benefits because we don't know yet who's going to get it. It's extra high this year though because normally, if we were in the middle of a contract, the raises would be built into RLM teachers, Howard teachers, high school teachers. But I don't know what their raise is yet because we're in negotiations. So I have to at least put something in there that is in the ballpark of what we're hoping to get them to settle for. But the step and track raises are in there because those are not negotiated. Those are they're negotiated, but we already know where they're going to be. Like if you're moving up a step, that happens whether we finish negotiations or not. Does that make sense?
Yes, but so we don't know the difference between the step and track numbers in here and the what else is in there? Do we know the
the step and track increase was about, is it like 138 or something? I think it was about, I had it written down. The step and track raises, for some reason, I think it was like about 138,000, but don't quote me on it exactly.
Okay, but we could break down that 300,000 and.
Right, but also in there is, if, like, say a teacher's retiring, that I know is retiring, well, obviously, if they're retiring at top step, we actually put it a little lower because we'll hire someone that's not making that same amount of money. So there's changes. So all those changes are in the salary. It's just, this is an anomaly year. This happens once every 4 years when you are in negotiations for a contract. If we weren't in negotiations or if we had already in the fall settled, I would know if they're getting, 1%, 2%, whatever they were getting, that money would have been built in there, and the only thing that would be in contractual benefits would be retirement benefits, buybacks, administrative increases, perfect attendance, all those other things. Vacation buyback, those things. But right now, it's big because I have to have something in there. And hopefully, we'll settle.
And then our sub costs were a lot higher this year than what we budgeted for? Is that-
Yeah, because I have two long-term illnesses that happened in September. 2 teachers that went out. One got injured, getting workman's comp, is out on workman's comp, but we still have to pay for the sub. And that person, you know, when you have a substitute, we pay our substitute teachers $75 a day, but by contract, once you become permanent, after 10 days, you actually go step on scale, so you get a bachelor step on, so you actually get regular pay.
Okay.
So by these teachers going out in September, I'm paying for these teachers, I'm paying their sick time, and I'm paying 2 new teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really like,
It's not like a
I
sub line.
added 2 teachers to our budget, which is another unanticipated cost, but, so we did not anticipate 2 long-term illnesses, and so we didn't budget enough for our substitute costs, which is another reason why the freeze is on, because then I can maybe, if teachers aren't doing professional development, I can take that and put that into the substitute costs.
So even under workers' comp, you still have to pay the sick time?
Yeah. You can explain the percentage.
So per contract, for every one, or for every 3 sick days used, 2 are returned. So they have a bunch of different options in their collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
Regardless, workers' comp only pays out 60% of their
Right.
annual salary.
Right.
So that money, when we are reimbursed, goes to the town, to their general revenue.
We
So
don't
the
see
money
it.
isn't even applied back to our general budget. So we are still paying their full sick time by collective bargaining agreement, and we're paying for the full sub. It also affects us because, well, we're returning them their time consistently per contract. If we fail to do that, we have to still pick up their MTRS pension and their employee benefits contribution. So no matter which way we look, we're going to lose some money. Right now, the biggest hit is when we get those workers' comp checks, they can't apply, which is normally what you would use to offset a substitute. Here, because it doesn't come back to us, we are now responsible for both.
It's just the way that the town of West Bridgewater is set up. I talked to David about it, and he said, no, or I talked to the town accountant and the town treasurer, and they said, no, the town gets the workman's comp. So even though our budget is paying the sub and the teacher, we don't get that 60%. The town gets it and goes into their general fund for free cash.
So
So I did ask if we could get that, but they said no.
So this would be an example, though, if then we had an unanticipated cost that you would go to the town to recoup that cost that they're getting reimbursed for.
You know, if they would, yeah.
well,
But it's
Kind of not fair. It's kind of not fair how they
it's
do
well,
it.
it's
You know, it's technically it's our money.
they're
It's in our
earning money
budget.
off of a claim
And the
that
town,
we're
because of the way the bylaws in the town are set up, it just automatically goes back into their budget, because their reasoning is that they're town employees, so therefore the money should go back into the town budget.
So does the same thing
Unfortunately.
happen if like a police officer is out on workers' comp? The police
did.
department
It
pays?
did.
It did, but the town, I guess a while ago, I'm not sure when, a couple years
A
ago?
couple years ago.
Yeah,
Within a couple
years
years.
ago,
Pre-cap.
the town passed, and I'm just going, so I don't know exactly, but
Right.
the town passed some type of policy that for police and fire, if they get workman's comp, it goes to the police and fire budget. I don't know why. I mean, my guess is probably in those, there's more chance of police and fire having workman's comp.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
related
this is
injuries.
unusual
So that's
for us to have
probably why they
somebody
did
out.
that. So
Yeah.
it does go back to police and fire. It didn't always, but it does now.
Mm-hmm.
Schools, it doesn't.
Is it something we'd want to look into, and then if we have that set up, maybe we won't have any more teachers go out on workers' comp? I feel like I like insurance. When you have insurance, you don't need to use it.
It's definitely
That's the
something that
idea.
we could talk to the town administrator about. I mean, I don't know how they went about, maybe it was happening with police and fire, and they may have gone to the town and said, this is something we can do about this. I think it was part of the Municipal Modernization Act, yeah. when the Municipal Modernization Act came through, there was a stipulation that you could do that by vote for fire and police. I don't even know if it listed that you can do it for schools.
If your road, we should get out.
Well, how do we know the amount that is being covered by our workers' comp? You're saying it's at 2/3 of what our expense is.
Right, so if you take, for this individual, her biweekly, and you calculate 60%, that's how much the town is receiving back, but we're still covering 100% of her costs.
Right.
In addition to,
With
we're
the sub.
restoring,
Yeah.
and
With
we're
the
restoring
sub.
more sick time back to her too.
Yeah.
So it will take longer for her to go unpaid.
Yeah.
And now that's no fault, of course, to the employee,
Of course.
but it's fiscally hurting us.
So, about how much was it? It's like she's got a lot of checks have come in. I mean, she's been out since September. She's, hurting.
Right, and she's
Right, which is
high on,
And she's
Salary
high on the
scale.
salary scale.
He's a 10?
what,
Oh, well, more than that.
Oh, boy.
No, it's just.
I mean, it's 60% of the person's salary since September.
her biweekly are $1,995
Bi-weekly.
biweekly. That's what we're receiving the checks in. And what they do is they only pay for time worked, contractual days. So if she gets a check for a 10-day period, teachers only paid 181 work days. So she'll still get a check during school vacation week. Now, the summers are deferred, so that's money actually earned, but what it does is increases her actual annual revenue. So she would get a little bit more than even what we would contribute out to her, based on how they calculate it.
I mean, the bottom line is the subline went up because, unfortunately, we had one person go out with an injury and another person go out with a terminal illness, 3 maternity leaves. And when you do that, you're paying the person sick time and you're paying a sub. And again, after 10 days, they become step 1 scale. So and you can't always anticipate those things.
But yet, we're supposed to level service.
You said it. Exactly.
Well, it's just hard when we're freezing the budget and not allowing, like,
Well, I'm
things
freezing
like
the budget so that
laminating.
we can try to cover these sub costs.
Right,
Well,
right.
that's it. I mean,
Between
so
the sub
last
costs
year
and
we
the special
voted
ed
on.
costs, we got buried.
Right. So last year the town voted on and believes that they gave us a level service budget. Let's say I don't remember. It was level service last year, right? But in actuality,
Well, no, actually, we did cut last year.
Oh,
We
did?
got cut by 75,000.
Yeah.
And we increased our school contribution last year.
Oh, that's right.
We got cut because of the
But we don't have, we
SRO.
can't increase our
SRO.
school
SRO.
contribution FY20. I'm
We
giving
don't have it.
everything.
What?
more school contribution.
I can't. I'm giving, I don't want to, but I've put in everything for next year.
Right.
Again, not a great way to balance, because if you have an emergency. Here's the other thing. When we had some maybe leftover school choice money, because maybe we would say, okay, we're not going to put it all in case we could cover these things. I don't have any left. We've maxed it out.
So if I'm doing my math correctly, which I might not be, if we were to get $1,400 per pupil, we would have an $18 million budget? Does that sound right? So we do 12,000 something? 400? I have to look at my notes.
Yeah,
12,744.
1,321 kids.
12,744.
I believe we have 1,321 totally in Sims right now.
So if we were just at the state average, we should have a budget of $18.2 million. And we're proposing a budget of
15.
15.5.
536.
I don't, and then you're saying, where do we cut? I don't think the question is where do we cut? How do we get our town up to the same, not even, just to the point of what our students deserve? And I personally don't think our students deserve the average. I think our students are above average. I think our town is above average. And we're talking about, I'm not going to try to do math in my head, $2.5 million after a 5.4% increase we're under?
If you're looking at per pupil expenditure, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know why we look at per pupil expenditure, except for that seems to be what we talk about.
Well, I think it's
so.
important. I think it's important because I don't think we can keep the services for these kids with this per pupil expenditure year after year after year. We've done a good job.
We've done a great
But
job, because I would say we're above average.
I don't know how much longer we can be on a shoestring.
And I mean, our taxes in town have gone up by less than 2.5% every year. Correct? Has anyone's taxes gone up by more than 2.5%?
Yes, that's correct. Last year they went up 1.5.
Okay, but I mean,
But whose fault's that? It's the way that
I
the
don't know.
town.
I'm not here to.
We don't get to vote on that. The town managers do that, and they base it on what their input is from the people that do all the assessing.
No, but what I hear from people is that our taxes just keep going up, and that our taxes are going, especially in my own house, I hear it. So how?
But you're sitting with all of us, so.
Right. So our taxes are going up, but we're not going up with the same rate of which what we need to operate.
I agree with you.
So how are we going to continue to do this? So
we need to find a way.
Is this a school budget problem, or is this a town budget problem, or is it a perception of what we have? Are we asking for too much? Are we asking for too much in the town?
I think it has something to do with perception. I think we need to get the town to understand that in order for us to raise the services that we have, and Dr. Oakley can chip in anytime she'd like, I think we need to get the townspeople to understand that we need, when we ask for a 5.4%, whatever we're asking for, I think that we need the town to understand that that's not asking for slush money, that's asking for us, the monies that we need for us to continue to educate the children of West Bridgewater at the level that we're comfortable with. Not the level that we want, but it's a level that we're comfortable with.
Right.
If it was a level that we want,
right.
I think Dr. Oakley and I have spoke about going as high as a 6.5% increase.
Well,
and that we already know would probably put Mo, I don't know how you feel about it, being on the finance committee, but I don't know what you would say if we came in and asked for a 6.5% increase.
If it's justifiable, I personally have no trouble.
Well, and I love you for that. But you know how it is.
I think, as you pointed out, just as a little aside, I think it is perception. When you throw a number at the town goes crazy.
Because it's big. It's because it's the biggest one.
Many things like this are a huge help, and I don't think you do anything like this at the town meeting. But to highlight some of these things in a way that the town says, well, it's a lot of money, but I understand why we need to do that. Particularly the cost per student as it compares to other towns. And most people in town have kids in school, or do they? I'm not even sure of that, actually.
I don't know.
We have a lot, and if they can understand that, I don't want to use the word dumb it down, but I mean, I've been in the FinCom for a long time, and it's staggering sometimes trying to see what these numbers mean. Just bring it to a level, as Jim said, that highlights why we need to spend more per pupil.
Well, I do plan on this year. We never have a lot of time to be able to present at FinCom and actually go through stuff. The way that it's set up.
Even at town meeting.
Yeah, but we got to get to the town meeting, and we could definitely do that. But I do plan on at least giving everyone on the finance committee and in the selectmen this PowerPoint, because I think it's important for them to see the per pupil expenditures.
The golf course, for instance, when we that came up, David put together a really
that was impressive.
presentation.
It really was.
Said, oh, gee, that is a good deal. And that's, I think, the only thing we have to do. I think people will spend the money, but it's the old thing we hear. We're just throwing money into a bucket and we don't know where it goes.
Right.
They need to have a better understanding of how we're spending it.
Yeah.
And then when
you know what? We work hard at it. It's not something that we take lightly at all. This is one of our main
your voter looks at that.
things that we do here.
agree.
Our biggest responsibility is the budget.
Molly, we're below where
Yeah.
we should be, and that's the reality. It's gonna cost money to get up there.
Yeah, I think and my math isn't great, but I just did it, and to get us to the 14,000, we would need an extra 20% on top of the 5.4%, so we would need a 25.46% increase in our budget to be at a 1,400. Right? I'm sure that would pass. I don't think there's a presentation we could do to pass
then
that,
the
but,
next question,
yeah.
I suppose, is what's the return on that investment in terms
Right.
of what you get increased?
I can't even imagine, because look at what we've been doing
Already,
as
yeah.
being the bottom of the state, and this school is way above average. I mean, obviously, my opinion is a little, it's not biased,
Conceited?
thank you for that, but
No,
but
I mean,
we've-
it's.
Look at our
it's-
graduation rate.
I was going to say,
Right.
our graduation rate, our MCAS results,
College
our
placement.
college placements, and it's when the perception of the town becomes personal. When the townspeople or those in office say, well, wait a minute, they overlook the student's need and this per student number, and they go to other numbers such as salaries or whatever it may be. When that's all contractual, and that's when, you look at it and you say, let's get to the real issue right now, and this per student figure is, as Molly's saying, so below. We're looking at 25% increase, and we're coming to the town with a 5.6. And when 2.5% of that's for sped only, I mean, those
25%
numbers,
would be just to get us to average.
Yeah.
those,
To
right,
average.
those
Don't
numbers
get
are
us to average, you're
staggering.
absolutely right.
Yeah,
Yes.
just to average.
That wouldn't even put us above
right.
the market.
But I've
right.
had people say also to me, well, yeah, look at your graduation rate, look what you're doing. So you're doing it with it, so why should we have to give you any more? The problem is that because of these increased needs now, we are not going to be able to continue to do the same things within our district because of the increased needs of out-of-district special education, because of having to do more for English language learners. And they deserve it. They need it. We have to do
Absolutely.
these things. That's where it's going to start coming out of. That's when you're going to say, oh, our product could go down if we don't keep it up.
Right.
So that's where.
Well, how different does the pie chart look 10 years ago than what it did tonight, between the special
education,
That's what I mean, how different,
probably get
how different does that look where the money's going? And, where was the money going before and where's the money going now is probably very significant.
Well, being optimistic about what Dr. Oakley just said, if we continue to go down the road that we're going, and we don't get the monies that we need to continue to be able to educate the students of West Bridgewater like we are, and the special ed continues to cost us, and learning English, also English language, also begins to cost us more money, we're going to see it with our graduating students. We're going to see the fact that 95% of our students are not going on to colleges, and some of them great colleges. They're not even going to go to college if they graduate. And we'll see that sooner than you think. So we need to start planning for that as a group now, because as this group begins to consider not being here together anymore, we need to prepare for the next group so they can continue it, if you
And
understand.
I also think that, it's twofold, and that's why also it can't just be the town, though. It also has to be the state, and we need to advocate, and I can't
Right.
stress that enough, that we need to get people out. We need to have our selectmen talk to our senators and talk to and say, you have to do something about these costs that are crippling towns and schools. The state also has to try to kick in. The inequity, as the superintendent from Brockton said, doesn't come from, we get the formula and everyone gets a certain amount of money. The inequity comes from the fact that a Burlington has made the commitment to put in extra money to give them that $17,000. They don't get that much, Chapter 70, but they've made a commitment to put in it over and above. The wealthy communities put the money in. West Bridgewater is not one of the top wealthy communities, so they can't put as much in, but that's where the difference comes from. That's where the inequity is. If everyone just took Chapter 70 and said, here's our foundation budget, this is what we think we need to do inadequate, here's your money, and kept the same, then Burlington wouldn't have more stuff than in Brockton. Everyone would be the same. But the inequity comes from the fact that the communities that can't put that extra money in don't get the same thing as communities that can put it in.
And I think across the boards, it's not just the school that has kept, their budget low. I think the town as a whole has always been very conservative, and I appreciate that because I think we've done a great job across the board. But I don't think we're doing ourselves a service in any of our departments by year after year increasing our taxes by such a low amount that now we're at a point where, we can't continue to provide
And the
what
things
we
that
need.
we have to do in a school are totally different than what we had to do 20 years ago.
Right. Which is, we could say that about the police department, about the fire
Exactly.
department, about the library. Everyone's had to change with the times, and that's what we want. As a town, we want to change with the times. So, but that costs money.
I looked at your virtual classroom, is that what it is?
Yeah.
And I look at, that's short money in my book for what we gain, and I can tell you from personal experience of when one of our grandchildren got to college and was floored by how much was virtual classroom. He was not ready.
A lot more than you think.
Not ready to manage his time and what he had to do, and I think if he had that, he could go to West Bridgewater, but if he had that prep, I'd have helped him, and I looked and I say, well, what's $6,000?
Nine.
Please, for the benefits you're getting, to me, it's short college, but I understand you're trying to cut where you can.
It's not easy.
So,
The short
shall we
dollars add up.
continue?
Yeah.
Professional development, and this is contractual, and, unfortunately, some of it I had to freeze this year, but by contract, we have to get teachers licensed. So we have to put it in the contract. And I did increase, because I froze this year and teachers have been missing out and they still need to get relicensed, I did up it by a little bit next year. Next we have instructional supplies, which again is 1% of our budget. The principals were asked to level fund, not even level service on this, level fund. So they level funded their whole budget, which includes textbooks, software, and other types of classroom supplies. So you can see the majority of what was decreased on this, a lot of it's textbooks, but it might have got moved to software and stuff instead, and then the virtual classroom.
Is that the big number for Howard? The negative on that? Why is Howard so substantial?
Because they put it in a different line.
Oh.
Like tech supplies. Or something.
Which is in the next.
Where?
No, it just looks like they cut a lot of money.
It just looks like they cut a lot of money, yeah.
Nice job, Tim.
It's all good, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Find 11 more.
Just giving you a shout out, Tim, that's all.
I had 110,000.
Mr. Bladwell,
it's
you doing
because
well
of
too?
It was the annual town meeting, not on the operating. That's fine.
What's that?
For Howard?
Yeah. For all of them. Because that's what they're given to be able to use.
I'm sorry, Howard class supplies.
The operating was higher
Was
than what was
118.
actually, and it
Oh,
got taken
oh.
from somewhere else.
I'm sorry.
It gets moved
Tim, I'll take
around.
that back, sorry, no, I'm kidding.
Because it's a bottom line budget,
I understand, sorry.
so
all
that's
right.
fine.
So what they asked for 2 years ago got cut too. Right?
Yes.
Nice.
Instructional technology. None of these really went up much. I don't know.
No.
Any questions on those? Oh, on library. Yeah, it's a little less because we had that digital literacy warrant that we got a couple years, 2 years ago. The high school counselors, and supplies on page 12, and those would be contractual increases such as step and track, not raises, but step and track.
I had a question about the high school guidance counselor, the 2.0 FTE during the summer. So we're changing the guidance secretary?
The guidance secretary.
Right.
So the secretary works a full year. She works in the summer right now, but that position actually is a retirement.
Yeah.
And so the new position's going to just be 10 months. So what they'll do is they work 192 days instead of 180 days. And it's really kind of going to be up to the principal and the guidance counselors on, do you want to put 5 days at the end of the year, 5 days, or come in a couple days in the summer or something like that.
Okay.
So.
It must help now that we're doing the schedules before the end of the year to make that
Yes.
happen.
When we didn't do that, they definitely needed to be, especially before.
Yeah, and we had a lot of time at the end of the summer for people to come in and make changes, which we don't have anymore.
Right.
So these are increasing the ESL. It actually is an increase, but then it's a total increase because of the contribution. In that would be FTE, but also there's money in there for like interpreters and stuff. It's all in the same line.
So is that the fells that you were explaining earlier too?
Yep.
Okay.
Everything that covers ESL is in there.
Okay.
Nurses, you can see that, where is it? Used to be, okay, so the change is the Spring Street nurse is getting reduced, but what that means is the Spring Street nurse has more seniority than the high school nurse. So the Spring Street nurse is actually bumping the high school nurse. The high school nurse will go to the Spring Street with the reduced FTE. So that's why the lines are different. So it looks like we're decreasing Spring Street, but it's because she'll go to the high school. Does that make sense?
So we're not increasing the high school nurse.
Right.
And the Howard nurse is increasing because of the grants lost.
The Howard nurse was the nurse that the grant paid for. Not all of it, about $40,000 for.
So you'll actually see a negative.
So we have to pay for that.
And the school physician?
School physician, every school has to have a physician.
Yeah. Okay.
By law to oversee, they check in with the lead nurse. They also do our athletic checkups and stuff like that.
Okay.
Physicals.
Yep.
Right.
Through the MIA?
And like if there's things that happen, like it's a medical emergency, or say we're dealing with, like whooping cough or something like you need to. There's certain things that you have to. Every school has to have a physician that kind of oversees.
Okay.
The nurses. McKinney-Vento is homeless transportation. And we actually just had a lot of extra this year that we didn't anticipate. So we're actually budgeting less because we looked at what we've done actual for the years. This was just like hopefully an anomaly year. So we went with the trends for the last 4 or 5 years and said, okay, we'll go back to that.
But again, we won't know. But we won't know.
Right.
Because you don't have.
This is the first time in, say, 5 years that it was this high.
It's kind of somewhat like the SPED. If someone moves in, you have no idea. If someone becomes homeless by definition, you have no idea.
And what we've been,
taxis.
we can also with homeless transportation, try to encourage the families to actually drive, and we can reimburse mileage, which is cheaper than
Sure.
us actually transporting them.
Oh, no, sir.
Yeah,
Is that new, or has that always been?
That's good.
that just,
That we've been
yeah.
doing.
Well,
Oh, it's new that West Bridgewater's been
Yeah.
doing it.
oh,
You can reimburse parents for McKinney Vento or out-of-district transportation if they're willing and able. And
That
it's at
little
the
word
IRS.
"if" has a big meaning.
It is if.
And at the IRS mileage reimbursement rate. So you're paying 54.5 cents a mile versus what you're paying the taxis. Because that's the alternative for the transportation in McKinney
Right.
Vento. You can't use the bus company usually. So
Most people
Ms.
don't
Page
want
has been
to,
doing a great job
but
of getting them.
Mrs. Page is on McKinney Vento,
Yeah.
and she's been trying to,
I was going to say, it's another hat
Can
that
it be,
she
can
wears.
it be a parent or a willing neighbor?
that's a good point.
It doesn't have to be a parent, right? The parents could.
Well, they would have
Yeah, I
to,
think
they
that's-
probably
They have to
do
approve
unless
it.
it was a guardian
Allow
or
one.
sign on,
Right.
but I would
Okay.
think it would have to.
Yeah, because it goes through your taxes.
No, right. Yeah.
The bus increase is because we're in,
A negotiating year.
not negotiating, but we get a 2-year option. So you get a 3-year contract, and then the 2-year option, so you don't have to negotiate, but it's already kind of been pre-negotiated, so yes, and that's why.
How are we
there's an
doing on the
increase.
gas thing? Is that still to our benefit?
The,
The cost of fuel?
no, the fuel.
Fuel fluctuation
Fuel
cost?
adjustment.
It hasn't been a major variance.
No, it's been pretty
Generally-
stable lately.
Yeah, we take the bus fees that we receive from those who live under 1.5 miles,
Yep.
and that's what we're using to pay for it.
Oh, okay.
So it's not costing us a significant amount. I mean, we do pay a little bit, but we do have enough pay-to-rides that it's not hitting us personally yet.
Okay, great.
So what about reviewing that with respect to the costs for taking the bus? How is that rate, how's that fee determined?
We just, so that was determined years ago, and it was $1 a day.
Okay,
So they
so is that
have
something
180.
that's reviewable?
Absolutely.
When was the last time we raised that?
It's never been raised because it was always that.
It's always been that rate.
For
We don't have that many pay-to-rides
eons.
right now.
Okay.
Sometimes the amount scares them, which is kind of silly at $1 a day. But
What do we
we
have?
also don't want to encourage an additional bus either. So with the pay-to-rides, it's only if there's an available seat.
Yeah, it's
So we
only
have
if
to do
there's
the
available
established
space,
route
and they have to be on an
on a
established
route
route.
already.
We don't
So-
just let anyone, we
Right.
don't put new stops in.
And
It's
with
like
all,
if you're
okay.
on the way,
Okay, all
with
right,
all the school
Kinda like
transfers,
when
a lot of
it's
them
freezing
are
out, they'll pick
eligible
you up.
regardless.
okay, all right.
athletics,
So wait, can I ask a question? When you say that the pay-to-ride goes back in there, so that's not indicated here by school contribution,
We have a
though?
fuel adjustment.
it's a fuel
line.
adjustment
Fuel
clause, so it's not
adjustment.
part of
Yeah.
the, it's not part of the actual budget.
There's a fuel line, so it's under maintenance.
So we'll
If it's
see
full.
that somewhere else?
Where are we gonna see that then? Sorry. Do we see that
It's
somewhere?
under- Yeah, it's under maintenance.
Maintenance.
Oh, maintenance?
Okay.
Maintenance of equipment, so it's page 22. You'll see vehicle fuel and maintenance, so it's a combination of gas, oil, maintenance on tractors, mowers, trucks owned by the school department, so they do have a few work trucks, the plows, and they have a tractor. And then the fuel adjustments and gasoline for those all under there as well. They're all paid in that line.
Okay.
But again, right now the pay-to-ride is covering the fuel adjustment costs based on the transportation contract we have right now with Lucini. So it really isn't hitting that line substantially.
And that's one of those things, you don't know what the fuel adjustment's gonna be. You can't, you don't predict,
Right.
it just depends
Of course.
if the fuel goes up or if it goes down, or, so you can't,
Right,
that's something we can't anticipate.
okay.
So it's not actually affecting our budget here.
If it hit us a lot, for
Then we'd have
example,
to
it was
go into this.
an odd year, gas went up $4 a gallon. We could also rely a little bit on athletic revolving if we have revenue to rely on. This year, we wouldn't. But that's part of building in the athletic fees because we use transportation so much for them. And we also utilize Lucini for that it's something that we could kind of appropriate some of that funds. So I know a question was on school contribution and where is the money coming from or going, and where are those fees coming? It's to offset everything.
Okay.
Next is athletics. So we did build in here a higher contribution, actually almost double the contribution based on increasing that user fee from 100 to 200. So that's something that you need to decide if that's the way you want to go, if you want to make that less, if you want to make that more, whatever. But I put it in to show you how it would affect and to get it down, the percentage down lower of the overall. Fees have gone up through the MIA, and I think partially because the MIA is struggling for funds right now, so they're putting it on the schools, and fees going up. Official costs have gone up, and again, transportation is also part of our negotiated agreement with Lucini, so if we're in the same year, that option year, it's the same increase with transportation. So although the difference between operating and appropriation looks like it's going down, it's because we've increased, we put the increased user fees, we put it in the school contribution under coaches. Questions about that? Comments?
Sorry.
Yep.
So officials is going up, but we're asking for less this year. So we spent 46,000 for officials, and we're only asking for 43 next year. We planning on not going to tournament. I'm just kidding.
No, I think it's just because it was moved from somewhere else. So if you look at it from what was approved, it's about actually going to be a little bit more than what was last year. It's just this year it went up because of I anticipated moving from somewhere else, right?
Right. So we only asked for 40 last year, but we spent 46, and now we're only asking for 43. Am I reading that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. But we have a good budget from Jen, so that's what she looked at it and went through, and definitely we're all set with that.
Okay. So we don't just go up to go up, is that what you're saying?
Maintenance, custodial services. This is the director of maintenance, custodians, ground maintenance. We also pay for a half of a man from the highway, forestry, DPW, I guess we call it now, department. And anything as far as, would be raises or like the director is contractual. Ground maintenance are also people. So they're the FTEs. Some of these are part-time people to add up to the FTEs. But we have day custodians, night custodians. So there's really not much wiggle room in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did we cut someone just to make the budget this year?
We haven't filled a position this year.
Mm-hmm.
An employee left the district, and in order to make sure we come in at budget and not over, he was paid a little bit more hourly than some of our others, so we can utilize a substitute at minimum wage right now, $12 an hour, and so that's where we're kind of hoping to do the savings. And he's an employee we like, so if he does get hired, he can also come in lower as well.
And then we go into heating and all the utilities. And these are all based on past Mickey went back, looked at past invoices, or trends, and kind of forecasted, look at what the current costs of kilowatt hours, what the, for electricity and therms and stuff, and you try to anticipate. She works also with MASBO, and they give you ideas, which is the Mass Association of School Business Managers, to give you ideas of what are the trends, what's happening with things. Is it going up? Is it going down? So, based on what she's been looking at, we're getting, and you can never tell because you could have a really cold winter or a really warm winter, and so it, give and take, but you have to kind of take a few years in a row and look at it. The biggest changes over the last several years have been through high school because we went from an older building to a newer building and a bigger building, even though it's more energy efficient. You're heating a bigger area and getting used to a new system. So there's been some ups and downs, but for the most part, it's not a huge difference. For any questions about that, or if you have any, right?
Yeah, it's based on averages. So this year it's warmer, which is why it looks like our operating is.
Right.
Oh, March isn't. He's in here yet.
Put on a sweater.
Still at March.
And you never know what 19 will ever look like until the end of March.
I mean, last year, remember how we had that cold spell, that like really, really, really freezing spell from, I think, the end of December through the end of January was just frigid. So that's a lot different.
Heating and electric can only ever rely on averages.
We also had a horrible March last year.
Well, we had that with snow, so we're hoping.
So you gotta.
I bet the town's hoping on that too. So
that'd be great. They've been doing a great job though with the roads again this year.
So electric on the next one. And our electricity is offset by that Palo Verde, which is the solar farm field. Yep. The problem with that is you never know how that goes. Like, I was talking to Dave Gagney about it, and he said, for example, you think that you're going to do well and get a lot of credits from that, and then the month of September, we had like one sunny day. And it does make a difference. You get, you get a lower amount and you don't get the reimbursement. So again, that's one of those things that you can never tell. But so we get two bills. We get the solar bill, and we also get the National Grid. And one of the things that we still want to look into is solar panels on the high school roof to see if we can get even more credits, or at least even just cover this building down the road. It's not something we could do during the project because it wasn't built into the project. It's something that you have to do after your closure and stuff. But after we had, we looked into it a lot more deeply this year than we ever have before, so we have a much better handle on that situation. Questions? This thing, I mean, utilities.
Control.
Maintenance of ground is, now the sewage, you remember we had the conversation last year, and the town took over some of the sewage, the Department of Health Department.
All of it.
Except we still have to, we still have tanks, like chemical tanks, through the science department, and some of those things that we still are responsible for. So we had to keep money in our budget so we have additional pumping that isn't part of the sewage.
We still have a science lab tank. We still have a tank behind maintenance that gets all the drippings off of the trucks and tractors in the garage. That has to be treated and properly dumped. It's a separate tank. It does not go into the septic system.
What garage? Sorry.
The garage out back maintenance.
Where Julie's stuff is?
Where Julie is. She has two tractors and a truck in it.
Yep.
And then those have to be tested and then dumped.
Sure.
So
So the town
and
can
then
do all the stuff, but
we're still also responsible if a pump goes down.
yeah, repairs.
If any pumps go down or anything needs to be jetted because it
Or
gets
if a
clogged.
kindergarten student decides to take all the toilet paper rolls and put it down the toilet, like.
See how many flushes it takes?
That's it.
They do at Spring,
We have to pay
they
for
do
that.
that at Spring Street all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's the superintendent. Anyway.
No, I'm not down there.
But anyway, those things fall under us still,
Yep.
unfortunately.
And then waste removal is the dumpsters, and we actually did look in to see if we could piggyback on what the town does and stuff, and Mickey talked to both Ms. Donatelli and Mr. Anderson, and they said, what we're getting here is a good deal, and they knew the company that we're dealing with, so.
Yeah, I brought the company in here.
So, they
So
said,
you're getting a better deal,
it's
trust me.
not
Good
worth.
for recommendations.
Nice job, Mr.
Good for recommendations. So we just need
They're great
recycling.
to
He's
deal
all
with.
over the waste removal.
They're great to deal with. I'm sorry, I use them
Give him
everywhere.
a pass on me, please. Thanks.
Hey,
Thank you.
hey,
He did it first.
Maintenance of
it's our money
buildings.
so you can spend it.
On what?
All right,
The
we don't
policy
have much
stuff?
more to go, come on, pay attention, please.
Sorry.
He lost us all.
I feel, we got a little bit to go. Maintenance of buildings. So these are when things break in the buildings, basically, and,
Right.
things happen, we have to repair it. And so to the HVAC system, the electrical, any repairs of different services that are in the building. And again, Mickey looked at the actuals for the past few years. Now, it doesn't mean that in one place it might go up, but in a different area, in this section, it might go down, so we could move it. Say all of a sudden we need more of the high school services, then maybe it would go down somewhere else. But, overall, you look at it and, it's based on averages and stuff. And some of the high school stuff has gone up because our warranties are gone. So if something breaks, then now it's not in the warranty.
Is the Howard services up because of the gym floor? Is that included in?
Yes,
Yeah.
gym floor was included in there, yes.
Okay.
Doing the gym floor over.
Yeah.
Yep, that was the increase. Which it actually came out nice.
It's very nice, yeah.
And hopefully, we have a special town meeting March 25th
Matching
to
roof.
hopefully get the gym roof done, inside and out, because that's the last roof thing we need to get done. So maintenance of equipment, these are the service contracts of all the copiers and fire alarms and fire extinguishers and elevators and emergency door, like anything like that, all service type contracts that we have to call people in to service, that we have contracts with different companies. And we work with different people to put those together. A lot of them are through Mickey's office, but some of them through technology and stuff, and work with Ed and John to try to bring that down as much as possible and tighten that up a little bit and make sure that they were what we needed.
Failing data processing. We switched from school-based accounts to district for larger discounts.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. Insurance. This is any of the insurances we have to pay, but also we need, I think unemployment would be in here, and any
It's
other.
all of our bonding, it's, any kind of error on the job. Minor, because most of the other benefits are good too.
Yeah, most of our benefits are through the town, but I know unemployment insurance is through us. It used to be through the town, and then it changed way back when, and I don't know
Mostly
why,
bonding.
but it did.
How do you define operating again, Patty?
Operating is what we are spending to date now. So what we have in there now that we're using. So if we're over, it means that we've overspent that line. So what we'll have to do is when we reconcile it is hopefully there's money in a maintenance line that we can put there. Acquisition of equipment, we're not. Replacing equipment, we're not. Programs with other districts. This is actually a regular ed program. This is if students want to go to either Bristol or Norfolk Agricultural. By law, we have to allow them to go there if our local vocational program, which is Southeastern Regional, does not offer the program they want. So the agricultural schools do offer some things that are the same as Southeastern, but they also offer things that Southeastern doesn't have. If a child chooses to go there, we not only have to pay for their tuition, but we have to pay for their transportation. The reason for that is because we live in a county that doesn't have their own agricultural school. So our kids, by law, have the right to go to either Bristol Aggie or Norfolk Aggie. If we lived in those counties, we wouldn't be paying this amount of tuition. But Plymouth County doesn't have an agricultural school. So is it fair? I personally don't think so. But other superintendents are also trying to fight it. And there's no way around it. Currently, we have 2 students who potentially, one is registered and one has applied to go as a freshman. So we have to budget for those.
I don't like that we pay more, but I like that our students have that opportunity.
Yeah, it just seems to me that the whole state should have the same opportunity. Just because the Plymouth County hasn't put the money forward to build a school like that doesn't seem like it's fair.
What would that cost the state if we built a whole other school?
Right. It just, I don't know, just seems like it could be split more evenly, even though, and you know, it's interesting because I was talking to the superintendent of Bridgewater and he was, I believe, what he was saying was that Bridgewater is still Plymouth and Raynham is Bristol. So if he has kids that go from Bridgewater Raynham, if they live in Bridgewater, he has to pay that, but in Raynham, you don't have to. It's
Oh, that's funny.
not fair.
So he's only advertising.
And they literally are just over the line. So, special education. So we have the director and the secretary. Any expenses? Again, these are contractual things, really. And then special ed teaching services. And you can see the teachers, instructional assistants, any special education instructional assistants, supplies, testing, and this is where, again, the changes in step and track would be in there, but not the COLA because we're still, same thing with regular teachers, we just haven't negotiated yet.
So is the cost going down from what we asked for last year to what we're asking for this year just due to what we're going to contribute ourselves?
In special education?
Yeah, are we not on special education?
Yeah. No, some of that cost going down could be that there's no raises in there yet.
Oh, so that's in that line.
That's in contractual benefits. So,
so some of that will come over
it's going
here?
down, but this is going to go up once we negotiate a contract.
Okay.
Oh, I gotcha.
So this is down by 40, but that contractual benefits might be up by, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so this is showing down by -3%. The other one's showing up by 10%, which would be...
Yeah. Which would be the same for the other one. So there's no COLA salary increases in here.
What does COLA mean?
Yeah.
Cost of
Cost of
living.
living.
Cost of living what?
Allowance.
Oh, allowance. Adjustment.
There's just the step and track. Next, we have the special services, so the speech and language pathologists. Now, You're gonna notice in this that operating is a lot higher than what we budgeted, because it's one of our speech and language people that are out on long-term leave. So we're actually paying a substitute, and that person is step on scale because the person went out in September and they're gonna be here for the whole year. So that's cost that we couldn't anticipate. So it looks like
So why isn't that cost in our
we're
sub
asking
line?
for less, but we're asking for less because we're hoping we only have 2 people next year and one of them isn't a sub. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
She's just paying it out of that line
We're
right
paying
now.
for 3 people this year while one is out because they've been hired and contracted as
'Cause
a
basic-
teacher, as a permanent sub, 1-year appointment. And then next year, either the individual will return or
The teacher
Because the
will-
person, because
something
it's
will happen.
basically been a full
We're
year.
returning to 2 FTEs.
Yeah. So we're actually paying for 3 people this year.
So in the other line item that we looked at before, only accounted for the overages of 2 people, and this is the overage of a third
Right.
person.
This one, yeah. The school psychs. Right here. 1 in each building. And testing. Those are tests that the school psychologists and special ed teachers have to give. Special ed transportation, this is one of the bigger increases, and it's due to an increase in some out-of-district placements, obviously, but also some changes in placements, and they might be further away, or the change, remember I said that all of a sudden someone needed a monitor on the van, and
Yeah.
that would be an increase there. So that is part of that big 321,000 is the transportation. I added that in together. It wasn't just out of district placement. It wasn't just the tuition, but also the transportation. And then no acquisition of equipment for them, no replacements. And then the tuitions, the out-of-district tuitions for special education. You can see that we have different types of placements. So you have collaborative tuitions. Those are to, like, if someone's going to North River Collaborative, Pilgrim Collaborative, South Shore Collaborative, Reed's Collaborative, those types of placements. And then there's the Mass Public Sped tuition, which means that different schools have programs, like Whitman-Hanson has some programs, East Bridgewater has some programs that we might utilize that they put together for certain kids with disabilities. And then the non-public special education, those are private placements, and they're usually more restrictive. That would be where your the residential ones would fall into that, but there are a couple other ones that fall into that also. And then the behavioral services is our ABA, BCBA services for kids, and you can see that that actually is one of the things I was talking about with Corey, building capacity. We actually have a person on staff that does that versus, it was probably close to double that before we started that because we had to do it through a company. So, that's where the in-service, so even though this is on the an out-of-district page, it's actually, we've brought it back in-house, and it's really helped us out a lot. And the handwall. So, the same with the OT, occupational therapist that we brought in this year. I mean, the person's handwall, and fits in with the culture of the building and knows the kids better because they're not just going over to all different schools, but we're building capacity in here, and we're saving money because we're not paying a middleman. So there are other things that I know Mr. Michael is looking into, continuing to do those things like that, and people have been very, very happy with those services at all the schools. So, you know, we're trying to do things and think outside the box and bring down those costs, but again, it's those low incident members that need those outages, the disabilities are just beyond what we can do. They're too severe and they have to be in a different placement, and those are the costs with the transportation that's going up. I know another thing that the state's trying to do, and the school superintendents put together a white paper kind of in support of that Foundation Budget Review Commission. And one of the things that we're suggesting is to add transportation to circuit breaker. So, you know, instead of just saying we have a $70,000 placement and we get 75% of that back once you go over 45, you know, so every dollar over 45,000 will get 70. Let's say, but also the transportation cost, 50,000. It boosts it up so you get more reimbursement that way. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get through the state, you know, that we're trying to push, because the transportation, you know, regional schools get transportation reimbursed. You know, so if you're a region like Whitman, you get reimbursement. You might not get full reimbursement, but they get some reimbursement. So why shouldn't we get it if we're sending a kid out of district? You know, and I would put that in and say part of that is too, we should get reimbursement for transportation for agricultural schools. You know, I mean, that's us sending someone to a regional school. So there's just a lot of things like that the state needs to take a look at, because a lot of things have changed since 1993. And the service, the way we educate kids, the kids we get today, the services they need, what we do, I mean, think about how education has changed since 1993. But the funding hasn't. Towns can't keep up with it. So that's what we put together for a level service budget. What you need to decide is what you want to do. What you need to decide is, you know, the next meeting in March, we basically would like to have a finalized budget that we present to you to vote on, that we would put forth to both the Finance Committee and the Selectmen. And that happens on, I believe, March 20th and 21st. Or 21st and 22nd is the Wednesday and Thursday.
20th.
Okay. So, we need some direction. This is what we're showing you, what level service is. I brought it down a little bit because I wanted to. I really want to propose to you that we need that 0.5 ELL. I think it's time that we increase athletic user fees. 200 flat fee. I know that sounds like a big increase, but our surrounding communities are well over 300. Some of them per sport.
They charge per sport.
Some flat fee, close to $400.
Right.
So 200 still is a bargain. We have not gone up for a long time. I always tell a story, but you know, I'm so old. I've been here for so long. Back in 1990, when I was a coach here, and we went through that recession in the early 90s, one of the proposals was to cut all JV sports. And instead, we had a proposal, and we put one of the first user fees in the area for $125 per sport per kid, and that was in 1990. So we're paying $100 flat for the whole year, and you can get 3 sports. So think about back in 1990, that was a lot of money. If now we're, you know, many years later. So, And it's not something that I like doing. We're a public school. I don't want to charge fees for parents, but we've got to, we need the revenue if we want to. And we have a great sports program, and we're building it up more and more. We're starting new things. We're lucky enough to have the booster support programs, so they've also given us contributions for a couple coaches this year. We have hockey boosters helping us with the inaugural year this year of the girls ice hockey program, because with Title IX we want to have the same amount of sports and the same sports for boys and girls. So, but there's only so much we have.
I should probably know this, but there are no other fees for any other type of activities or clubs or anything?
The only other fee we have is we have the $25 insurance fee for the Chromebooks.
Okay.
But we have parking fees for a parking sticker, so kids, and that's $25.
But no other activity fees for any other things that the school offers? Just
yeah, we have enrichment and surround care, but there's help funded.
Right.
After school programs.
It's been like 10 years since we went up on the athletic fees.
Oh, easy.
Been 10 years.
Yep.
Came in a little after I got here.
Yeah.
So,
but basically, we just know where you want to go. This was just put together so you understand what level funding looks like, understand the challenges we have. But if you think that we should be below, like I said, every 0.5% is 66,000. If you feel like it would be better to go into the selectmen and the finance committee under 5%, then you just need to let us know, because we need to figure out where we're going to take the money from. And we have, we will just have to do the best we can.
But the next idea is people starting to lose their jobs.
Right. They could. You always try to do things by attrition first, and hope that, if this person's retiring, maybe we can put this person here and cut this position. Similar to, on a little way, like, I wouldn't have cut the guidance secretary, but she's retiring, so now it's a new position, someone committed, So what you always try to do first is attrition, maybe extra jobs, so part-time things like clubs and activities, or stipended type things that are extra, and consolidate. And then, but it's people. And it depends how deep. If it gets to the point and the town says, well, we want you down to 340, and I have to cut 265,000, that's going to decimate the school system. I can just tell you that it will. Because basically what that is because I can't cut that 2.4%, basically what you're telling me is there's really no increase in the budget except for special education. And I have contractual increases. So do we have any directive?
You want us to vote on it tonight?
No, I'd like to know.
I think the general consensus might.
Are there any areas you want us to look in?
I think maybe, sleep on it and make some, you can call Patty, or we can call Mickey, if anybody, unless anybody has anything off the top of their head right now.
No, I think I think they did a great job. I think we should be.
What's your feeling about what we want to present to the town?
Well, in actuality,
because I can tell you, I've been here a long time. I've never gone in with a 5.46% increase to the town.
Well, I'm not going to open the door with what my feelings are. You already know what they are.
No, that's what you're here for. You're on the school committee, you should say.
I agree with Molly. We should go in at, I think we should go in at the 6.5.
I don't see how we could go lower than 5 point.
I can't either.
I don't either.
I don't
Couldn't agree
Because
more.
you've already incorporated your suggestions in
Yeah.
these numbers,
Right.
and that's what we come
And
down
I
to.
still, I hate losing those virtual high school.
We can't afford to continue to go backwards. We gotta go forward.
I think the work that you did with the .25 and the point of decreasing the Spring Street school nurse and the decrease in the guidance secretary to increase something that's of the ELL, which we have to do, I think that's great. And I think I would support the increasing the athletic user fee to offset the costs of what the other things are. But if we put that 9,000 back in there, what does that increase? Does that go to 5.5? It can't for $9,000. What does that do? 5.47?
If we don't
That's why we have to
decrease
decrease
the
She's
VHS.
doing her magic over there.
I can do it on my phone.
Mickey's doing it right now.
If we do those
We're at
numbers,
5.47 now, are we not?
Yeah,
We're
but
at
he's just talking about adding
$5.46.
$9,000.
Add 9,000 to the 5.47?
What's the percentage of 66 then?
you're not really asking us to do math in our head, is she?
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be probably like
5.5.
5.6.
Yeah, 5.7.
Not that high.
No, it's only $9,000. I don't think it should look that.
Well, not like we're looking for money to throw out the window.
I mean, this is what we need. So I think this is what we have to ask for. This is what we need. This is what we have to ask for.
I mean, this isn't even this is level service. This isn't even talking about the things that people throughout the year, being students, educators, parents, communities, say we should do this,
It's keeping the same
or we
thing
should
that we
do
have.
that.
It's keeping the same services that we have this year. The only difference is that ELL, but that's why I tried to offset it with
Right.
the other stuff. But as far as services to kids,
We're maintaining what we have now.
yeah.
So how do we say we're gonna? I don't. Just hearing people in general of what they want to see our school system do, and specifically our school system. How can we say, okay, now we're gonna do less? And I can't remember the last time someone came to me and was like, "Wow, I think the school is doing way too much." And, I think we think the school is doing a good job, but I've never heard. I mean, I shouldn't say never. I haven't heard lately anyone say,
Right.
there's so many programs and activities. And,
I mean, even just listening to with the monthly updates that Donna provides from the Inclusion Matters, that's all reinforcing and supporting everything that we've put into place for services. And there's a cost to that, with respect to the transportation and all of that. I don't know. I just, like what Molly said, I don't hear anything that through our updates and through our membership on other boards and committees, through the, school councils and all of that, through the strategic planning, we're offering more of these, now these electives, Life Skills 101, for example. I mean, I just think that everything is just kind of just coming back to what we're trying to do, our intentions of.
Yeah, and we're following everything. I mean, like that life skills one, that was one thing that was definitely on like the strategic plan.
Right.
So
We're listening. We're
we
tapping
follow our
into.
strategic plan, and that's
Right. So that has a cost, but
Dr. Oakley, you said you were going to get the PowerPoint presentation to the selectmen and the finance committee before we meet
well.
with them.
I think one of the things we're also going to do that's different this year, because Mickey and I talked about it, and it worked out, and it's something that she did in our last district. So instead of, we usually have one bound copy. I think we're actually going to do more of a setup like this, and that way I can add more information that can be given so that we can actually give more clarifying information, because I do think, based on last year and the year before, one of the reasons that we switched it is so it's just much more user-friendly, because we want the FinCom, we want the selectmen to work with us on this. So the easier it is for them, it makes sense to me. But I agree with Mark. I mean, people need more information, so we're going to do it this way. And, I'll probably clarify some things and maybe make them, bigger slides or whatever, and maybe put more explanation with it. But I know it helped the people that took the time to look at and go to our website and even take our hard copies that we had, some of them at the town meeting and when I gave them out to the FinCom on our mandates last year, the unfunded mandate.
Right.
I think it really did help people get their head around things. So I want to give out as much information as possible. So we're going to do it more like this and actually have, because I think also when they look through it, they might want to write on things better. I think it's better than just that big daunting with no other information. So we're going to give them more information this year.
Did you have handouts at the town meeting last year?
I had the unfunded mandate on the table, handouts.
I couldn't remember, but things like this.
Yeah, and that's what
highlighting where people go in, they can take this.
Yeah, and that was actually a suggestion that you had from when we were at Finance Committee, and a lot of people had seen that because we put it online, and we'll put this up there too. But then they, a lot of people took that, and people, it was good for them to see that.
Used in my last district.
I don't think everyone truly understands the special ed cost.
No,
and what
no.
That means.
I agree. So that's why I think going in, when we go into Finance Committee and Selectmen, explaining this beginning part to them too.
Right. I mean, thank you, Mo, for coming in and
Well,
just giving your night to listen to all of this.
Absorb in one night when you come, so I just want to make this easier in my.
Well, we're not
thank
there
you.
that long, so it's hard.
Right. We don't have
It's
much
very
time.
hard. Thank you.
Some other people from the Finance Committee did reach out and say that they're going to watch the
That's
watch,
good.
which
And I
if we
think
could
may
edit this
see
form.
some of the vote, but the vote's pretty fast then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but honestly, I mean, that's why it's on, on cable.
Yeah.
Right.
So they can see it and they have the slides and stuff, so
That's good.
I think it's important. And then they'll get the information. And honestly, anyone has any questions or wants this information, the PowerPoint, we'll end up, I've got to fix a few slides, but we'll put it up also on our website so people can go and look at it.
Yeah. I think the sooner we put that up, the better, too. I mean, get people, even though we haven't voted on anything, even.
No, but I think this is public, this is preliminary, and I think people need to see that this is what we're looking at right now. And, we're going to go over this the next 2 weeks. I also asked Mickey to look a little bit further into like the kilowatt hours and the thermostat. So some of those things could change between now and 2 weeks from now. For the better, if we get a better price or if we see that something's changing, but we just didn't have all the information yet because it's early.
Yeah, it's hard for people to come out, but if they're coming out for special town meeting, is there a way we could ask for or have set up a table for information after the special town meeting about the school budget if people wanted to ask, or is that
Probably before special town meeting, right? Wouldn't it be before?
well, special town meeting is not to vote on this.
No, special town meeting,
It's
there's,
just-
I believe, 4 articles.
So
I know that the Howard School roof is
yeah.
one.
I'm just saying at special town meeting, and I don't think a lot of people come out to it, but the people that do come out to it are the ones that might have questions.
People that
or-
come out to are the typical ones that come to all the town meetings.
Well, so if we offered some, because we don't
see.
typically
The more
offer an
information we can get
information
them, the
night
better
on our
off we are.
budget, but
I get it.
and I don't necessarily want to do a separate special
Presentation.
presentation.
Right,
And
right.
this is a presentation, but this is
Just to make it
over
available.
2 hours. So I don't know how far
No, but
someone
this
will
could
get
be
in watching
available,
this.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know how at the beginning of town meeting, sometimes they do a little video of something, maybe they will, while people are coming in before the meeting started, the video can be running, because it's very entertaining.
I wouldn't say entertaining.
It will increase attendance.
Maybe informative.
But
All right.
So, we want to go to the next?
We got the next one.
Public forum. Members of the audience wishing to address the committee may do so at this time. Audience members are reminded that personnel issues or issues that would violate student-employee confidentiality cannot be addressed during the public forum. None takers. Our next school committee meeting is Monday, March 11th, 6:30 p.m. here in the Middle Senior High School Learning Commons. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you.
Thank you.